when you are.
Hang on.
Mhm.
Scott, you got a clock over
Oh, great, great, great.
there? Okay.
Yeah, because I was going to try to do this stopwatch, but I was afraid it would fall off during the interview.
We're calling that the Drew Miller clock. 2 weeks ago, Drew Miller played here, and he said to us, "Do you have a clock?" We do now.
Okay.
We learned. Because I'm right here. So what I'm going to do is slate us in so we sync all the cameras and video.
Okay.
All ready? Okay. All right, take it away.
Hello, everybody. Scott Furkin here, and it's time for another in a series of interviews with artists appearing at the Hill House on Devil's Backbone, an open-air music venue high atop Kenwood Hill in the south end of Louisville, Kentucky. This time I'll be speaking with Dom Flemons, a Grammy Award-winning multi-instrumentalist, singer, songwriter, documentarian, music scholar, many other hats that he wears. A founding member of the Carolina Chocolate Drops, in recent years he's focused on solo and collaborative works, earning the moniker the American Songster for a repertoire of music that spans almost 100 years of American roots music. He's appeared on stages all over the world, and tonight, thanks to an assist from Jug Band Jubilee, he's here at the Hill House. Dom, welcome.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Now, I referred to you as a multi-instrumentalist, so let's just start with what instruments do you play, and which ones will we be hearing this evening?
Well, tonight I'll be playing the guitar, the banjo, the harmonica, the rhythm bones.
What are the rhythm bones?
The rhythm bones, they're actually right here. I have them in my pocket.
Okay.
These are actually cow rib bones cut to length, and I hold them between my fingers, and when I move my wrist, it gets a click, somewhat like the castanets.
Awesome.
And so I'll do a little bit of the rhythm bones there.
Okay.
I also play an instrument called the quills, which look like the pan flute from South America, and I'll do an American version of that. That's the main stuff I have this time. I'll have multiple harmonicas I'll play, a few different styles of harmonica playing, also a few different styles of guitar playing. And tonight I got two different banjos with me since I was able to drive down. I have my 4-string plectrum banjo. So that's a banjo with 4 strings and a long neck on it. And then I have my special custom-made banjo from Jeffrey Menzies, luthier out in Jamaica. And this is what they call a Boucher-style banjo. This is a banjo that was made popular in the mid-1800s, and so it's a lower-toned banjo with gut strings on it.
Awesome. Well, I know that you've been in Louisville before. This is your first time at the Hill House, but tell us about your previous visits to Louisville and what your connection with the Jug Band Jubilee.
Well, you know, I've had several different performances with the Jug Band Jubilee, and that was actually my first time coming out to Louisville was with Rod Wins, the original director out at the Jug Band Jubilee, and then I've gotten to keep up with Michael Jones, who's been doing the Jug Band Jubilee up to recent years, and you know that was my first start. But I've had a couple of different places that I played in Louisville, but of course those are my favorite ones there. You know, I also played at the Clifton Center at a different point a couple years back. And just to be able to celebrate the music of Louisville and Western Kentucky, and to be able to talk a little bit about the early country blues and early American music, it's a beautiful thing.
Awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit about your early life. I think you were born in Phoenix. So
That's correct.
tell us a little bit about what life was like what family life was like as a youngster in Phoenix.
Well, it was just my mom and my dad and my brother, and I guess just pretty normal background. Grew up and went to swimming and stuff as a kid, and trying to ward off the 125-degree weather that we tend to have in Arizona. And I guess when I was about 16 or so, I started to play the guitar. That was when I got into stringed instruments.
Okay.
That was after several years of playing percussion and drums in the school band,
Okay.
leading all the way up into high school when I played in a 4 bass drum line in the marching band.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was how I learned about polyrhythmic music and learning how to work with different sectioning of rhythm and everything like that. And so when I started to play stringed instruments, I found that there was a way to be able to incorporate those things into the way that you finger picked the guitar or strummed it, and then the banjo even more so. So that was what got me started into playing those things. And from there, I hit the streets and I started busking instantly from there. And around 2005, I got invited to an event on the Black and African roots of the banjo, which happened in Appalachian State University in North Carolina. And that was my first time heading to the South and getting a chance to play some music with folks, learning a little bit more about the deep history of the banjo. And that's what led me to want to become a professional musician. So I packed up everything I owned and I drove from Arizona all the way out to the East Coast and followed the dream, and that's what's led me here now.
Well, we're glad you did. I wanted to ask a little bit about your parents because it seems that they both have a strong connection to a long line of folks who were influential in the development of the American Southwest. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, sure thing. Well, on my mother's side, I'm African American on my dad's side and Mexican American on my mom's side. On my mom's side, we were 6th generation Phoenix natives, and so her family's history goes all the way back to Guadalajara, Mexico, and then it slowly goes up the line, going through the mines, the copper mines of Arizona, and eventually getting to Phoenix proper. And so that's a deep tradition that's a part of the Southwest there. And then my father's side, my father's father, my grandfather, came out from eastern Texas, and then my grandmother came out from Arkansas, and they both moved out and they settled in Flagstaff, Arizona to start a new life. And my grandfather was a preacher in the Church of God in Christ, as well as a sawmill worker. And so he found that it was sort of a better way to live out in Flagstaff than back in Texas where he was from, where he grew up on the farm. And that was where my dad was born. And then my dad, he was a basketball player, point guard, and made his way down to Phoenix, and that's where he met my mom.
What were some of your early musical influences?
Well, I mean, when it came to starting to play music directly, I had access to a great library in Phoenix, the Burton Barr Library, which is in downtown. And I found myself getting into early rock and roll at first. So it was things like Chuck Berry and Carl Perkins and Jerry Lee Lewis, Jimmy Reed, and Howlin' Wolf, and Muddy Waters and people like that.
Sure.
And then slowly as I went along, I found that there was music that came before it. There was music contemporary to that music and music that moved forward. So there was... Then I started to get into the music of people like Leadbelly and Big Bill Broonzy and Bob Dylan and Leadbelly. And I also found myself getting into the music of Hank Williams and Ray Price, Willie Nelson. It just keeps going from there, And then when it gets to the 1920s and 30s music, that took me to a whole other level. And that's where I got into people like Charlie Patton. When we're talking about Louisville, that's where I first started to hear the jug bands, Earl McDonald and Clifford Hayes and their separate groups, as well as their group together as the Dixieland Jug Blowers, the Memphis Jug Band, and then I got into people like Henry Thomas, which is why I started playing the Quills, actually, because of Henry Thomas's music. Another fellow named Papa Charlie Jackson, who was a six-string banjo player, guitar banjo player. And from there, that was when I started to find that there was this sort of strain of musicians that fit outside of the normal boundaries of country music and blues, and they were known as songsters. And that's when I started to really delve into that style. So someone like Leadbelly, he was a musician that sort of fit outside of the boundaries of normal parameters that we would have for American music in terms of strict genres as they would develop over time. And so being drawn into that, that was how I started taking on the moniker of the American songster.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about the Carolina Chocolate Drops. You're a founding member.
Yeah.
What was it like to be? How did that group come together, and what was it like to be part of an old time string band?
Well, it was one of those things I mentioned before, the Black Banjo Gathering, which happened at Appalachian State University. That was when I first met Rhiannon Giddens, and we started playing music together. And that was, I'd say, about a month before I graduated from university over at Northern Arizona University, where I went to school.
And that was with a degree in English?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
And so after I got back from the gathering, I decided to move out a month later, and after I graduated, made my way out, and then Rhiannon and I started the Carolina Chocolate Drops with Justin Robinson, who at that time had started to play with an old-time fiddler named Joe Thompson. I had met Joe Thompson over at the gathering, and I really was deeply moved by being able to sit with an old-time player of that age and of that stature, and to be able to play this music that went back, so many generations.
Right.
I also got to meet a couple of other musicians, one named Aljamain Hinton, who was a wonderful Piedmont guitar player from eastern North Carolina. Also, I got to meet a wonderful musician, Mike Seeger, who is the brother of Pete Seeger, founder of the New Lost City Ramblers. And all of them, in one form or another, showed me a lot about the music. And knowing that I could have access to these people, because of course in Arizona, there was a local community of people that played music, and I got to play with them, did a lot of jamming, learned a lot of music. But when I got a chance to sit with Joe Thompson and saw that there was an opportunity to learn the music from him directly, I couldn't pass up that opportunity. Another thing that happened was that I saw that African American string band music, especially the type that Joe represented, it was such a rare commodity in the world of folkloric music. Even though I was studying English in my technical degree, I was moonlighting in the library, and I was reading books about folk music. I was studying the records of folk music. And black string bands, I found that they hadn't been necessarily documented nor talked about a lot in these books. They would sort of be talked about in the periphery in one form or another. Like, the roots of the blues, you might find a string band in there. Country music, you might find a story of an African-American musician who was influential to someone, such as like the story of a guy like T-Top Payne, who was a black man who taught Hank Williams how to play guitar. You might find a story like that somewhere along the line. But black string bands as sort of an idea and as a living musical form, it was something that was a very rare commodity. So I saw there was also an opportunity in being able to put together an all-black string band that would lead to, I didn't know what it would lead to necessarily, but I knew that it would cause a stir, and I knew it was something that was new and innovative, even though it was old and went back many generations. And so with the Carolina Chocolate Drops, I tell people all the time, and sometimes it's hard to believe, but when we played in that group, it was a standing ovation every single gig, and there was something, there was the music, of course, that brought that standing ovation on, but there was a certain spirit and energy that this old-time music brought to people that was, it just changed their lives, and it changed our lives as well.
Well, you said you didn't know what it would lead to. One thing it led to was a 2010 Grammy for Best Folk Album.
Oh, yeah.
Comment on that. How thrilling was that?
Well, it makes me laugh to think about it now, but it was something that I knew would happen. We had such a open highway at that time where there were singular blues performers who were African American. There were bands that were African American that played R&B, maybe some roots music, but a string band that was playing traditional old-time music. It was so rare that it was an open highway with that group, where when we would play in any place, we could handle multiple types of American music. So it wasn't just old-time music after a certain point. Because of the knowledge base I had, I would also bring in blues, country blues. I'd also bring in jug band music, and that's part of the reason we started playing the jug band Jubilee, was that I played the jug.
Okay.
And so I brought that into the context of string band music, which was something that people hadn't really done a whole bunch at that time. And so bringing that in, I used to do snare drum in the group because I one played in the marching band, but I also found there was a very special type of fife and drum music that comes out of the Deep South. And so I learned those rhythms over time. And then when I started the group, I started to incorporate those rhythms into our string band music. So with that group, we were able to have a very multifaceted approach to the way that we were presenting the music. So it allowed us to go a lot of different places. And so when it comes to the way that the Grammy went down, we'd recorded one album by that point, and by the time we got to the Grammy-winning album, we'd recorded 3 albums. So we had built up a fan base over time. And so for me, when I started talking with the record label, because I did a lot of the talking with the label, when we got together with None Such Records, we doubled down on the fact that we had made a name for ourselves so much with what we had done independent of the record label, that then when that album came out, it not only brought all the audience we had gotten previous, and this is again before social media, so we'd brought all that audience in, and then it exploded outward with a lot of the same interest with a brand new audience. And so it just naturally exponentially grew into something that a Grammy was inevitable in a certain type of way, you know. So it was beautiful, and you know. And again, I came in there feeling very confident and had some really special moments when I was there. You know, after we had won, we were getting a portrait done backstage, and so you know, I had my bones on me when we had won. I had it in my jacket pocket. I had a jacket, so in a suit, you know. So I had my coat pocket, and when we won, I pulled the bones out and started rattling them and kind of did a little spin up on the stage, you know. And so backstage a little bit later, we're getting portraits done, and a fellow taps me on the shoulder, and he starts asking me about it. And he's like, "Well, what's that you had in your hand? I want to see that instrument." And I turn around, and it's Herbie Hancock. And so Herbie Hancock starts talking to me about, he's like, "Show me how to play the bones." So I'm putting the bones in his hand, and I'm teaching him how to play it. And he starts telling me stories about growing up in South Carolina and how his family used to play the spoons, and how the bones reminded him of those early memories of him playing the spoons before he even started playing piano. And those are just special moments that come up with in those times. And so the Grammys is always holds a wonderful place in my heart because of that.
Absolutely. Well, in the time we have left, I want to make sure we talk about your solo work, particularly the album Black Cowboys, which was also nominated for a Grammy, Best Folk Album. What was the impetus for that album, and how did it help raise the profile of African Americans who helped form and shape the American West?
Well, in the most simplest form, I was traveling back to Arizona at one point after being on tour all year, and I came across a book called The Negro Cowboys, and it talked about the fact that 1 in 4 cowboys who helped settle the West were African American cowboys. And that led me to start looking up stories about black cowboys, being someone from the Southwest, having not really known that history per se. It was something that became of interest to me, and I found that there were several books that were on selective subjects. It was cowboys, buffalo soldiers, Pullman porters, early settlers, and different separate sort of categories of Western settlement. Of course, as I started to read it, I thought about my parents, and my dad's family, because I hadn't necessarily thought of them as like Western pioneers in a way, but they were part of that Western movement that happened after the Second World War, that was a part of the building of the Southwest, especially in northern Arizona at that time. And so for me, it was inevitable. After about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years of looking up these books, I knew that I had to make an album dedicated to Black cowboys. And not only that, I wanted to do it on Smithsonian Folkways, because I knew that was a label that was very important, and it would be a label that would understand the concept of Black cowboys.
Gotcha.
And then I also knew that they had a series dedicated to African American legacy. And I performed at the opening ceremonies for the National Museum of African American History and Culture. And this series was a series dedicated to a partnership with Smithsonian and the museum. And so I wanted to be a part of that. So then I just started putting it together. I found different songs that would connect the stories of Black cowboys, and also found songs that were specifically came from Black cowboys, and there were stories and written documentation that talked about them. I also wanted to bring the Black songsters into it, and then also wanted to write a few new songs, which I ended up doing as well for some of the larger-than-life characters of the West.
Great. Well, I know that last year you premiered your 4-part documentary series, The Real Wild West. Just real quickly, can you tell us about that? Does that related to everything you just said about trying to uplift the role of Black cowboys in the development of the American West?
It was an extension of my work there. I had been asked to interview with the Real Wild West originally on Curiosity Stream. And as I began to talk with the production team and started to do my interview, they found that our goals in elevating the story were completely aligned. And so they asked me to be the host and the narrator for the whole series. And it was a great honor to be a part of that, because they knew that since I knew that history from having studied it myself and written my own version of that in my own album, it was a simpatico relationship that we decided to embrace. And so then I did all the voiceover work for the Real Wild West, and it's a wonderful series.
Absolutely. And I think the theme music is Travelin' Wildfire, which is the song you wrote.
That's correct.
And also the title of your most recent album.
That's correct.
Okay.
And
also Grammy-nominated album.
Yep, absolutely. And so they were asking for a song that would fit the mood of this, of the tension of the West, because it's a story of progress and freedom, but it's also a story of many hardships. And Traveling Wildfire, in many ways, as a song, is about that, being able to transcend, but transcend through very hard times, and it sort of takes you down into the doldrums of the process of moving through very hard times and pain and struggle. And so the fact that they embraced it was a real honor for me, and of course that ended up being the title of my album, Traveling Wildfire.
Right. Well, it's been fascinating to speak with you. I could go on, but we're going to need to wrap this up. And I thank you so much for your time, and looking forward to your performance this evening.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be on the hill with you.
Thank you.